Young billionaire leaves a wallet full of cash near a poor mother on Christmas Eve. But what she does leaves him in tears. Christmas Eve had arrived with all its characteristic grandeur. The downtown streets were transformed into a genuine visual celebration. Lights flashed in red and gold, intertwined on the posts and trees. Enormous wreaths hung from store facades, swaying gently in the frigid wind. A gigantic Christmas tree dominated the center of the town square, covered in ornaments that shimmered under the spotlights. The air carried the unmistakable smell of roasted chestnuts, hot chocolate, and cinnamon from the kiosks scattered along the sidewalks. It was the kind of scene that appeared in movies. Perfect, magical, full of life. Entire families hurried past, carrying colorful bags and gift-wrapped presents. Children ran between adults' legs, shouting with excitement, their faces red with cold and happiness. Couples holding hands paused at the decorated shop windows, pointing and laughing. Groups of friends met on street corners, exchanging tight hugs and holiday wishes. Everyone seemed to have a place to go. Everyone seemed to belong somewhere, except for Dawson Blake. He was sitting alone on a wooden bench in the furthest corner of the square, where the lights did not reach with such intensity. He wore a grey overcoat that must have cost more than most people spent on clothes in an entire year. On his wrist, a glistening Swiss watch, impeccable Italian shoes. Everything about him screamed success, money, achievement. But his face told another story. Dawson was 35, but seemed to carry the weight of a much longer life. His dark eyes were sunken, tired, with the kind of exhaustion that doesn't go away with a night's sleep. The lines around his mouth suggested someone who had once smiled a lot, but had forgotten how. He observed the activity in the square with an almost surgical indifference, as if he were watching a movie in which he had no role at all. As if he were an invisible ghost, sitting there just to pass the time until time passed him by. 35 years old, owner of an expanding supermarket chain, majority partner, apartment with a panoramic view, imported car, an enviable bank account, and absolutely no one to share any of it with. Dawson sighed deeply and crossed his arms, trying to shield himself from the cold. But the cold he felt did not come from outside. It came from within, and that kind of cold has no coat that can fix it. That was when he saw them. Across the square, walking slowly amidst the hurried crowd, were a woman and a little girl. The difference between them and the rest of the people was subtle, but visible to anyone who paid attention. And Dawson was paying attention. The woman must have been about 27. Blonde hair fell over her shoulders in natural waves, slightly messy from the wind. Her fair skin was pink from the cold. She held firmly the hand of a little girl, also blonde, who couldn't have been more than 5. The clear eyes of both sparkled as they looked at the illuminated shop windows, but neither of them stopped to go inside the stores. Their clothes were simple, not torn, not dirty, but visibly old. The girl's coat was too big on the shoulders, clearly not originally hers. The mother wore a jacket that was too thin for that cold and carried an old shoulder bag with a patched strap. But there was something about them, something that made Dawson keep watching. It was the way the mother occasionally bent down to listen to what her daughter was saying, the way the girl squeezed her mother's hand every time she saw something beautiful, the way they smiled at each other, even though they had nothing in their hands. Connection, bond, something real. Dawson quickly looked away, as if he had been caught doing something wrong. He ran a hand over his face, feeling the fatigue weigh down even more. He didn't know why that scene bothered him so much, or maybe he knew exactly why. He had none of that anymore. Perhaps he never truly had it. Without thinking much, or perhaps thinking too much, Dawson reached into the inner pocket of his overcoat and pulled out his wallet. Dark brown leather, well kept, full of credit cards, money, and documents. It even had an old photo of him with someone who was no longer part of his life, someone who had painfully proven that trusting was dangerous. He looked at the wallet for a long moment. Then, with an almost casual gesture, he placed it next to him on the bench. He stood up, adjusted his coat, and walked away. But he didn't go far. He stopped near a newspaper stand, about 10 yards away, pretending to flip through a magazine. In truth, he was observing the bench, observing the wallet, watching to see who would pass by there. Maybe it was a test, maybe it was just morbid curiosity, or maybe it was the need to confirm what he already believed, that people were predictable, that everyone took what was available, that honesty was a luxury only the privileged could afford. He didn't wait long. The blonde girl was the first to see it. She tugged on her mother's sleeve and pointed at the bench with her little finger. "Mommy, I found this wallet." Hannah Brooks stopped immediately. She looked where her daughter was pointing. Then she looked around, as if searching for the owner. Then she approached slowly, as if checking if it was even real. She picked up the wallet carefully, as if handling something fragile. She opened it. Millie stood on tiptoe, curious, trying to see what was inside. "There's money, Mommy." The girl's voice was soft but excited. Her clear eyes sparkled. "We can buy food for Christmas." Hannah stood still. She looked at the money, mentally counted how much was there. Probably more than she earned in a week of work. She looked at the photo inside the wallet, a well-dressed man with a serious appearance. Then she looked at her daughter. "No, sweetie, that's wrong." Millie frowned, confused. "But no one is watching, Mommy." Hannah slowly knelt down until she was at the girl's height. She held the small face with both hands, gently but firmly. The mother's blue eyes met the daughter's blue eyes. "Daughter, we do not take what isn't ours, not even when no one is watching. Do you understand?" Millie looked into her mother's eyes. Then she nodded slowly, even if she didn't fully understand yet. "We give it back," Hannah continued, softening her voice. "Because it is the right thing to do, and because that is how I want you to be, always." The girl nodded again, this time with more conviction. "Okay, Mommy." Dawson was far away, but he heard every word, every syllable, every pause. Something inside him shattered. He turned his face away, bit his lip, tried to take a deep breath, but he couldn't hold it back. A hot tear streamed down his cold cheek. Just one. But it weighed as if it were 1,000. Because how long had it been since he had seen this? How long since someone chose to do the right thing simply because it was the right thing? Not out of fear, not for self-interest. Just because. He quickly wiped his face with the back of his hand, trying to compose himself. But when he looked again, Hannah was already coming toward him. She must have seen him near the bench earlier, must have made the connection. "Excuse me," she said, her voice firm but polite. "I think this is yours." Dawson looked at the wallet she held out to him. Then he looked at her eyes. There was no judgment there. There was no superiority. There was no pity. Only honesty. He slowly took the wallet back, still processing what he had just witnessed. "Thank you," was all he could manage to say. Hannah gave a small smile and began to turn away, taking her daughter's hand again. But before she could leave, Dawson spoke. This time his voice came out differently, softer, more human, less guarded. "Forrest, have you eaten dinner yet?" Hannah stopped mid-step. She turned slowly, looked at him with an expression of genuine surprise. "What?" "The two of you." Dawson pointed slightly at Millie, who was next to her mother, rocking from one foot to the other. "Have you had anything to eat today?" Hannah hesitated. Dawson saw the internal struggle happening right there, in front of him. The pride, the dignity, the distrust. But he also saw the exhaustion, and the hunger, and the burden of being a single mother. "We're fine," she replied, but her voice lacked conviction. Dawson shook his head slowly. "I'm not asking if you're fine. I'm asking if you've eaten yet." Silence. Millie tugged insistently on her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, I'm hungry." Hannah closed her eyes for a second. She took a deep breath. Then she looked back at Dawson. This time, with fewer defenses. "Why are you asking that?" "Because I have too much food at home and no one to eat it with." It was as simple as that, direct, without embellishment, without empty promises. Just the raw truth. Hannah looked at him for long seconds, assessing, searching for signs of danger, of ulterior motives, of traps. But all she saw was tiredness and loneliness, the same as hers. "Okay," she said, finally. Dawson's house was in a quiet neighborhood, with tree-lined streets and large, well-maintained residences. He drove in silence while Hannah and Millie sat in the back seat. The girl had her nose pressed against the window, jaw dropping at the huge houses decorated with Christmas lights, inflatable figures, and illuminated reindeer. "Mommy, look!" Millie pointed at every house, delighted. Hannah just smiled, running a hand through her daughter's hair. When the car stopped in front of a two-story house with a modern facade and an impeccable garden, Millie's eyes widened even more. "You live here?" Dawson merely nodded and got out of the car. When they walked in, the girl's enchantment only increased. The living room was enormous, with high ceilings, minimalist designer furniture, and a Christmas tree in the corner that looked straight out of a decorating magazine. But despite all the beauty, the place seemed empty. There were no photos on the walls. There was no clutter. There were no signs of life being lived there. "Sit down," Dawson said, pointing toward the dining table. He disappeared into the kitchen and returned with trays, perfectly browned roasted turkey, creamy mashed potatoes, grilled vegetables, various sauces, pies, warm bread rolls. Everything was there, arranged, untouched, as if waiting for guests who never arrived. Millie climbed onto the tall chair and looked at everything with her mouth open, her eyes sparkling with enchantment. "I've never seen so much food together," she whispered, almost with reverence, as if afraid to break the spell. Hannah looked at her daughter, then at Dawson. "Why did you make all this yourself?" "I hired someone to make it." He sat on the other side of the table, far away, maintaining distance, but I wasn't going to eat any of it anyway. They started eating. At first, the silence was strange, tense, charged. But gradually, as the minutes passed, it transformed into something more comfortable. Millie ate slowly, savoring every forkful as if it were her last. Hannah tried to maintain her composure, but Dawson saw the relief on her face. He saw the silent gratitude. He saw the vulnerability she tried to hide. After a few minutes, he decided to break the silence. "I didn't think anyone would return it." Hannah stopped chewing, looked at him. "Carry the wallet?" He nodded, holding his fork without eating. "I left it on purpose. I wanted to see what would happen." Hannah didn't seem offended, just thoughtful. She put her fork aside. "And what did you expect?" "For someone to take it, for it to disappear." He lowered his gaze to his plate. "To prove that I was right." "Right about what?" "That people always disappoint." The silence returned. But this time, it was different. It was heavy, laden with meaning. Hannah looked him directly in the eyes. Having little is no excuse for being dishonest. The words fell like stones. It wasn't judgment. It wasn't moral superiority. It was principle. It was who she was. Dawson was speechless. For the first time in a long time, someone had said something he couldn't argue against. That was when Millie, who had been quiet until then, looked at him and gave a wide smile. "You are very serious," she said, her tiny voice breaking the weight of the moment. "You should smile more." "Smiling is good." Dawson blinked, surprised. He looked at the girl, at her genuine smile, without malice, without judgment, at her clear eyes full of innocence and truth, and then, without forcing it, without quite realizing how it happened, he smiled. It wasn't a polite smile. It wasn't perfunctory. It was real, true. Coming from a place he thought he had forgotten how to access, Hannah saw it, and she smiled too. For a brief instant, at that table full of expensive food and empty of history, something changed, something small, almost imperceptible, but essential. The coldness began to melt. As the night went on and the clock neared 10, Dawson drove them back. The car glided along the illuminated, now emptier streets, while Millie dozed in the back seat, her blonde head resting on her mother's lap. Hannah ran her fingers through her daughter's hair, looking out the window, lost in thought. Dawson stopped in front of an old apartment building. No doorman, no modern intercom, no Christmas decorations, but clean, decent. Hannah woke Millie carefully, whispering in her ear. The girl slowly opened her eyes, sleepy. "Thank you," Hannah said, before opening the door. "For the food, and for the company." Dawson just nodded, unable to find the words. They got out. The door closed with a soft click, and then he was left there, alone again, in the silent car, on the empty streets. But this time the emptiness was different. It wasn't the usual void, that comfortable and predictable emptiness he had learned to live with. It was a new kind of emptiness, an emptiness that hurt, as if something had been taken from him, but at the same time as if something had been put in its place. He had felt warmth, he had heard laughter, he had seen real connection. And now, going back to the big empty house, he missed it. Dawson rested his forehead on the steering wheel and closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. For the first time in a very, very long time, he didn't want to be alone. Dawson woke up early that Christmas morning, not because he wanted to, he simply couldn't stay asleep. The house was too silent. The kind of silence that hurts. He lay there for a few minutes, looking at the ceiling, trying to understand what he was feeling. There was something different, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Restlessness. Not the bad kind of restlessness, the one that comes from anxiety or stress. It was something else. It was as if something had been awakened inside him. Something that was asleep, forgotten, buried under layers of disappointment and coldness. He got up, took a shower, and put on casual clothes, made coffee, but barely touched the cup, turned on the television, but didn't pay attention to anything. His thoughts were elsewhere, they were on them. On the blonde woman with clear eyes who had returned the wallet without hesitation. On the little girl who had told him he should smile more. On the two of them sitting at the table the night before, eating with such gratitude that it seemed almost painful to watch. Dawson didn't quite understand what was happening to him, but he knew he couldn't stop thinking about that moment. About that feeling of being complete, even if only for a few hours. He ran a hand over his face, trying to focus on anything else, tried to check emails on his phone, tried to look at company reports, but nothing worked. Everything seemed unimportant. That was when an idea struck him, simple, small, but persistent. The girl, Millie. The way she had looked at the Christmas tree in his living room. The way she had been enchanted by the food. The way she had said, with that tiny voice, that she had never seen so much food together. Dawson knew they didn't have much. It was obvious. And it was Christmas. And the girl probably wasn't going to get anything. He tried to ignore the thought. Tried to convince himself that it wasn't his problem, that he'd already done enough by giving them food, that he didn't need to do anything else, but the idea wouldn't go away. So he grabbed his car keys and left. The downtown area was different on Christmas morning. The streets were empty, the stores closed. Only a few were still open, the ones that operated for half a day to catch the stragglers or the last-minute desperate. Dawson drove without haste, observing the deserted streets. Normally, he liked this kind of scenery. Silence, emptiness, comfortable solitude. But today, it felt wrong. He parked near one of the few open stores. A small toy shop on the corner, with decorated but simple window displays, nothing sophisticated, nothing expensive. It was the kind of place he would never normally enter, but today was not a normal day. Dawson walked in. A bell jingled above the door. The place smelled of new plastic and cardboard. There were shelves full of toys of all kinds. Toy cars, games, stuffed animals, puzzles. Everything a bit disorganized but welcoming. An elderly man with grey hair appeared from the back of the store, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Good morning, still time to grab a present," he said with a tired but kind smile. Dawson just nodded and began to walk through the aisles. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for. He just knew he would recognize it when he saw it. He passed the remote-controlled cars, too expensive, too flashy. That wasn't it. He passed the board games, too complicated. That wasn't it. He passed the giant stuffed animals, exaggerated, definitely not it. And then he saw it. On the middle shelf, among other more attention-grabbing and colorful dolls, was a simple doll. It had curly brown hair, painted pink cheeks, and a light blue dress with white details. No lights, no sounds, no technology, just a doll. Simple. Honest. Dawson picked it up from the shelf and looked at it for a moment. It was perfect. Not because it was expensive or sophisticated, but because it was real. It was the kind of doll a child could hug, take everywhere, create stories with. It was the kind of doll that mattered. He returned to the counter and placed the doll on top. The man smiled. "Good choice. This one is a favorite. Kids love it." Dawson took his wallet out of his pocket. "Could you wrap it for a present?" "Of course. Would you like colorful paper or something more neutral?" "It doesn't matter." The man took the doll and began to wrap it carefully, folding the paper precisely. Dawson watched the process in silence, his hands in his pockets. "Is it for your daughter?" the man asked casually, as he fastened the paper with tape. Dawson hesitated. He didn't quite know how to answer. "No, it's for an acquaintance." The man nodded, placing a simple red bow on top of the wrapped gift. "Whoever it is for, they will like it. This kind of gift is special. It's not about how much it costs. It's about what it means." Dawson picked up the wrapped package and paid. He left the store with the doll tucked under his arm, feeling something strange in his chest. It wasn't pride. It wasn't satisfaction. It was care. Real care. Genuine. Uncalculated. Back in the car, Dawson placed the doll on the passenger seat. He looked at it for a long moment before starting the engine. He didn't know exactly why he had done it. It didn't make sense. He barely knew these people. He had only spent a few hours with them. He had no obligation whatsoever. But somehow he felt he needed to do it. Maybe it was because of the way Millie had smiled at him. Maybe it was because of the way Hannah had taught her daughter to do the right thing, even when it was difficult. Maybe it was simply because, for the first time in a long time, he had felt something beyond emptiness. Dawson leaned his head back on the seat and sighed deeply. He didn't know what he was doing. He didn't know where this was going. But he knew he couldn't just forget. He couldn't go back to his old life as if nothing had happened. Something had changed. He had changed. Dawson looked again at the wrapped doll next to him. The red bow shone under the morning light. It was a small gesture, simple, but it carried weight. It carried intention. It wasn't about impressing. It wasn't about looking generous. It wasn't about fulfilling social protocol. It was about being present, about showing that he cared, about starting something different, something he couldn't name yet but felt was important. It was the beginning of real care. He started the car and began driving back toward his house. But this time, he didn't feel so alone, because now he had a purpose. Small, perhaps, but real. Tomorrow, he was going to look for them. He was going to deliver the doll. He was going to see Millie's smile. He was going to see Hannah's look. And maybe, just maybe, he was going to start understanding what it meant to have something or someone who truly mattered. Dawson parked in the garage, picked up the doll carefully, and went inside the house. He placed the package on the living room table, right in the center where he could see it. And for the first time in years, he went to sleep looking forward to the next day. Not out of obligation, not for a work commitment, but because there was something, someone, he wanted to see, and that, in itself, was more than he had had in a very, very long time. The next day dawned cold and cloudy. Dawson woke up earlier than expected, with the anxiety of someone who has something important to do, but doesn't know exactly what it will be like. He quickly had coffee, changed clothes 3 times until deciding on something casual, jeans and a grey sweater, and grabbed the wrapped doll that had been on the living room table since the night before. He looked at the package for a moment, feeling its weight in his hands. It wasn't physically heavy, but it carried something more: expectation, hope, fear of doing something wrong or intrusive, but the desire to see the two of them again was stronger than any doubt. Dawson left the house with the doll tucked under his arm and drove downtown. He didn't know if he would find them. He didn't have a phone number, he didn't have an exact address. He only had an intuition and the memory of that park bench where everything had started. The square was different the day after Christmas. The lights were still on, but the activity was much less. A few families strolled with children testing new toys. Elderly couples sat on the benches enjoying the fresh air. Everything had a slower, quieter pace. Dawson parked and walked slowly toward the center of the square. His eyes scanned every corner, every bench, every shadow. He was looking for two specific faces, two pairs of clear eyes that had affected him in a way he couldn't explain. And then he saw them. They were sitting on the same bench as 2 days ago. Hannah had an old book in her hands, reading aloud in a low voice. Millie was beside her, swinging her little legs that didn't reach the ground, looking up at the cloudy sky with childish curiosity. Dawson's heart skipped a strange beat. Relief, anxiety, something in between the two. He took a deep breath and walked toward them. Millie was the first to notice. Her clear eyes widened. She tugged hard on her mother's sleeve. "Mommy! Mommy, look!" Hannah lifted her eyes from the book and saw Dawson approaching. The surprise was clear on her face. Surprise, but not discomfort. Maybe even a little contained joy. "Hi," Dawson said, stopping about 2 yards away, holding the wrapped doll in front of his body like a shield. "Hi," Hannah replied, slowly closing the book. "I didn't expect to see you again." "Me neither," he admitted with a half smile. "But I wanted to bring something." Millie had already climbed down from the bench and was looking at him with eyes sparkling with curiosity. "What is it?" Dawson crouched down to the girl's height and held out the wrapped package. "It's for you. Merry Christmas." Millie looked at the gift, then at her mother, as if asking for permission. Hannah hesitated for a second, but then nodded with a gentle smile. The girl took the package with both small hands and began to tear the paper off with excitement. When the doll's blue dress appeared, she let out a little scream of joy. "A doll!" She pulled the doll out of the wrapping and hugged it tightly, clutching it against her chest as if it were the most valuable thing in the world. "She's so beautiful." Millie turned the doll around, looking at every detail, the blue dress, the curly hair, the painted eyes. And then, without warning, she let go of the doll for a second and ran to Dawson, throwing her little arms around his neck in a tight hug. "You came back," she said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "I thought you wouldn't come back." Dawson froze for an instant. He wasn't prepared for this. He wasn't prepared to feel the embrace of that small child, so genuine, so full of pure, uncalculated affection. He closed his eyes and returned the hug, feeling a tightness in his throat. "I came back," was all he could manage to say. When Millie finally let go of him and ran back to the doll, Dawson slowly stood up and looked at Hannah. She was standing now, her eyes shining with something that looked like gratitude mixed with confusion. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. "I know." Dawson put his hands in his pockets, trying to look casual. "But I wanted to." Hannah looked at him for a long moment, trying to understand, trying to read between the lines, trying to figure out what this man truly wanted. "It was good not to spend Christmas alone," Dawson continued, filling the silence. "It's been a long time since I felt that, that feeling of being with someone real." Hannah nodded slowly, her eyes still fixed on him. "Shaz, it was good for us too." They stood there for a few seconds, just looking at each other, while Millie played with the new doll on the bench, creating stories in a low voice. Dawson knew he needed to say what he had been thinking all night, but he didn't know how to start without sounding strange or intrusive, so he just said it. "I own a chain of supermarkets. Some of them here in the region." He took his hands out of his pockets and crossed his arms, trying to look more confident than he felt. "I can try to get you a job, if you want." Hannah blinked. The surprise was total. "What? A job?" Dawson kept his tone firm but gentle. Nothing too complicated at first. Cashier, stocking, customer service. Something that gives you stability, fixed salary, maybe even some benefits. Hannah was silent. She looked at her daughter, who was completely absorbed in the doll. Then she looked back at Dawson. "Why would you do that?" It was the question he knew would come, and it was fair, completely fair. Dawson took a deep breath before answering. Because you reminded me that not everyone disappoints." The words came out simple, but loaded with weight, with truth, with something he had held onto for so long that he almost forgot how to say it out loud. Hannah stared at him. He saw her eyes well up, but she blinked quickly, controlling herself. "I don't want charity," she said, her voice firm but not aggressive. "It's not charity." Dawson shook his head. "It's an opportunity. You work, you get paid. Simple as that. I have no interest other than giving you a chance, because I can, and because you deserve it." Hannah was silent, processing. Dawson could see the internal struggle happening, the pride, the necessity, the distrust, the hope. She started, but stopped. Looked at Millie again. "I have a daughter. I can't just leave her alone. She's still too little. We'll figure it out." Dawson had already thought about it. "If she's not in school yet, she can stay in a safe area of the store while you work, or we'll adjust the schedule. It doesn't have to be perfect right away." "We'll adjust as it works out." Hannah ran a hand through her blonde hair, clearly conflicted. "Why me?" she asked, almost whispering. "You don't even know me." Dawson took a step closer, not too close, just enough for her to know he was being sincere. "Because you returned the wallet, because you taught your daughter to do the right thing even when it was harder. Because in 2 days you showed me more character than people I've known my whole life." The words hung in the air between them. Hannah discreetly wiped the corner of her eye and looked down, biting her lip. "I don't know what to say." "Say, you'll think about it." Dawson took a step back, giving her space. "You don't have to decide now, but the offer stands. Whenever you want." Hannah lifted her eyes and nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll think about it." Millie appeared beside them at that moment, holding the doll with both hands. "Look, Mommy, I'm going to call her Bella." The girl twirled the doll in the air, making the blue dress spin. Hannah smiled, the kind of smile that transforms an entire face. She knelt down and adjusted her daughter's hair. "Bella is a beautiful name, my love." Dawson watched the scene. Mother and daughter, pure bond, unconditional love, and somehow he felt part of it now. Not as an intruder, but as someone who had been invited to see, to be, to matter. "I'll let you enjoy your day," he said, starting to walk away. "But if you need anything, find me. Deal?" Hannah nodded. "Deal." Dawson waved at Millie, who waved back with the doll, making Bella wave too. He smiled, a real smile, the kind that hurts because it's so true, and began to walk back to the car. But before leaving, he looked back one last time. They were still there. Hannah had returned to sitting on the bench, and Millie was beside her, showing the doll and telling animated stories. And for the first time in a long time, Dawson felt he had done something right, something that mattered, something real. 3 days later, Hannah called. Dawson answered on the second ring, trying not to show how much he had been waiting for that call. "Hello? Is this Dawson?" Her voice sounded nervous on the other end of the line. "Yes, Hannah." "It is. I thought about the offer." She hesitated. "If it's still on the table, I accept." Dawson smiled to himself in the empty office. "Of course it's still on the table. When can you start?" "Whenever you need me." "Monday?" There was a pause. "Okay, Monday." On Monday morning, Hannah arrived 15 minutes early at the downtown supermarket. She wore dark jeans and a simple white shirt. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She held Millie's hand tightly, the girl still sleepy, clutching the doll Bella. The store manager, a middle-aged man named Mr. Smith, greeted them kindly. Dawson had personally called him over the weekend, explaining the situation. "Welcome," Mr. Smith said, extending his hand. "Dawson told me about you. We'll show you everything slowly. No pressure." Hannah shook his hand, clearly relieved. "Thank you. I brought my daughter. Dawson said maybe—" "No problem." Mr. Smith looked at Millie with a smile. "So, hi, little one. Do you like to draw?" Millie nodded shyly, hiding her face in her mother's leg. "Then you'll like it here. We have a perfect little corner for you." He led them to the back of the store, near the administrative office. There was a small desk against the wall with a few chairs. Mr. Smith brought construction paper, crayons, and markers. "Here. While your mother works, you stay here drawing. Deal?" Millie looked at her mother, who nodded with an encouraging smile. "Okay," the girl said softly, climbing into the chair and placing Bella next to her. Hannah took a deep breath, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. The first few days were about adjustment. Hannah was trained on the register. She learned how to scan products, deal with the system, make change, and smile even when she was tired. It was simple work, but it required attention, and she dedicated herself to every detail. Millie stayed in her little corner, drawing. She drew houses, trees, stick figures. Sometimes she drew her mother. Sometimes she drew Bella. Sometimes she drew Dawson, always with a big smile on his face. During her break, Hannah would go over there, bring a simple snack she had brought from home and share it with her daughter. The two of them would eat together, talk softly, and laugh about small things. It was a new routine, but it was good, stable, safe. On the third day, Dawson showed up. Hannah was at the register, serving an elderly woman who was complaining about the price of tomatoes when she saw him entering through the main door. Her heart skipped a strange beat. He was wearing casual clothes, jeans and a navy blue button-down shirt, but still looked different from everyone else there. He had a presence, not arrogant, just solid. Dawson walked slowly through the aisles, picking up a few random things, bread, milk, coffee, things he clearly didn't need. When he got to Hannah's register, he placed the items on the conveyor belt and smiled. "Hi." "Hi," she replied, trying to maintain professional composure. "Everything okay?" "Everything. Getting used to it." "I am. Mr. Smith is very patient." "And everyone here is nice." "Great." Dawson paid in cash and picked up the bag. "And Millie, is she bored?" "No, she loves drawing. She's already done about 20 drawings since Monday." Dawson smiled genuinely. "Can I see them?" Hannah blinked, surprised. "Now, if she wants to show me." Hannah looked at the clock. It was almost time for her break. "Can you give me 5 minutes?" "Sure, I'll wait over there." He pointed to the tables near the internal snack bar. 5 minutes later, Hannah appeared with Millie. The girl held Bella in one hand and a pile of drawings in the other. When she saw Dawson, she ran to him, her eyes sparkling. "You came?" "I did." He knelt down to her height. "Your mum said you made some amazing drawings." Millie nodded excitedly and began to show them, one by one, colorful houses, giant trees, stick-figure families holding hands. "This one is you," she said, pointing to a stick figure with black hair and a huge smile. Dawson picked up the drawing and looked at it carefully. There he was, Hannah and Millie all holding hands. Above them, a bright yellow sun and birds flying. "It's beautiful," he said, and he wasn't faking it. "Can I keep it?" "You can." Millie handed over the paper with pride. Dawson carefully folded the drawing and put it in his shirt pocket, close to his heart. From that day on, Dawson started showing up frequently. Not every day, but 2-3 times a week, always casual, always without pressure. Sometimes he bought something, sometimes he just stopped by to say hi, sometimes he brought coffee. "I thought you might need it," he would say, handing a thermal mug to Hannah during her break. "You don't have to do this," she would reply, but she always accepted, and she always smiled. "I know, but I want to." Millie was always excited when she saw him. She would run to show him the new drawings. She would tell stories about Bella. She would ask if he had smiled that day. "I did," he always replied, "because of you." And it was true. The weeks went by and that became routine. Hannah worked. Millie drew. Dawson showed up. There were no demands. There were no heavy expectations. Just presence, just silent care, just genuine attention. Hannah's colleagues started to notice. They would make light jokes, but never malicious ones. "Your friend came again," the girl at the next register would say with a mischievous smile. Hannah would roll her eyes, but she couldn't hide her smile. Mr. Smith noticed too. But he just watched from a distance, satisfied. He had seen a lot in years of retail, but this was different. This was genuine. One Friday afternoon, Dawson showed up earlier than usual. Hannah was organizing products on the shelf when she felt his presence. "Hi," he said softly so as not to startle her. She turned around, still holding a can of corn. "Hi. You're early today. Finished things sooner." He put his hands in his pockets. "Thought I'd stop by before heading home." Hannah placed the can on the shelf and wiped her hands on her pants. Millie will be happy. She made a new drawing today. Said it was special. Oh, really? Yes. Hannah hesitated, then continued. Dawson, thank you. For everything. For the job. For showing up. For caring. He shook his head. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do. She looked directly into his eyes. You changed our lives, and I don't even know how to repay that. Dawson was silent for a moment. Then he gave a small smile. You already repaid me, just by being here. Just by letting me be a part of this. Hannah felt her eyes sting, but blinked quickly. You are a good person, Dawson Blake. He shrugged, trying to appear casual, but she saw the impact of the words on his face. I'm trying to be. They stood there for a few seconds, just looking at each other. There was something in the air, something unsaid. Something growing slowly, unhurriedly, without forcing. Then Millie came running, holding a piece of paper. Dawson, look what I made. The moment broke, but it wasn't lost. It was just saved. Dawson knelt down to see the drawing, and Hannah watched the two of them, feeling something warm in her chest. This was routine now, and routine had never felt so good. 2 weeks after Hannah started working, she extended the invitation. It was a Friday afternoon. Dawson had stopped by the store earlier, as usual, bringing coffee and talking to Millie about the new drawings. As he was leaving, Hannah called him. Dawson, wait. He stopped and turned around. And she was nervous, fidgeting with her hands, clearly rehearsing what she was going to say. Is everything okay? It is. I wanted to invite you to dinner. The words came out fast, almost tumbling over each other. At my house, tomorrow night. If you want, of course. You don't have to accept if you... I accept. Hannah blinked. Seriously, Dawson smiled. What time? 7:30? I'll be there at 7. Hannah gave a relieved, almost shy smile. Okay, I'll send you the exact address by text. Perfect. When Dawson left the store, there was something different in his chest. Expectation, happiness. A warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. He had been invited. Not to a formal event, not to a business meeting, but to a real dinner in a real home with people who truly cared. On Saturday, Dawson spent the day feeling anxious. He tried to work at home, but couldn't concentrate. He watched television, but nothing held his attention. He kept checking the clock every 5 minutes, watching the time pass too slowly. At 6:30, he got ready. Nothing too formal. Dark jeans, a light blue shirt, casual shoes. He looked in the mirror and, for the first time in a long time, didn't just see tiredness looking back. There was something more. Life, perhaps. Before leaving, he stopped at a local market and bought flowers. A simple bouquet of white daisies, nothing exaggerated. Just a gesture. The address Hannah had sent was in a simple neighborhood, away from downtown. The streets were narrower, the houses smaller, but everything was clean and tidy. Children played on the sidewalks. Neighbors chatted on their porches. It was the kind of place where people knew each other, where doors were left open, where real life happened. Dawson parked in front of a small 2-story house. The paint was faded, but the front door had a new welcome mat and a vase with flowers next to it. He got out of the car, picked up the bouquet, and climbed the 3 steps to the door, took a deep breath, and rang the doorbell. Small footsteps came running from the other side. The door opened and Millie appeared, smiling from ear to ear. You came. She jumped and hugged his legs. Dawson laughed, almost dropping the flowers. Of course I came. I promised, didn't I? Millie, let him in first. Hannah appeared behind her daughter, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was wearing a simple light green dress and her hair was loose over her shoulders. She was flushed, probably from the heat of the kitchen. Sorry, she said, smiling. Come in, please. Dawson walked in. The house was small, very small compared to his, but there was something there that his house lacked. Warmth, life, belonging. The living room had an old but clean sofa, with colorful pillows, a small television on a wooden shelf, photos of Millie on the walls, from baby up to now. her drawings taped to the refrigerator, visible from the living room, the smell of homemade food coming from the kitchen. "I brought these for you," Dawson said, holding out the bouquet. Hannah took the flowers, surprised and her eyes shining. "They are beautiful. You shouldn't have—" "I wanted to." She smelled the flowers and smiled. "I'll put them in water. Make yourself at home. Everything is almost ready." Dawson sat on the sofa while Millie settled down beside him, showing off Bella, who now had new clothes made from scraps of fabric. "Mommy made them," Millie explained proudly. "Look, she even has little shoes." Dawson examined the doll carefully, admiring the details. "Your mother is very talented." "She is," Millie agreed, nodding her head. "She can do everything." Hannah returned with the flowers in a makeshift jar and placed it on the coffee table. "The table is set. Shall we eat before it gets cold?" The small kitchen table had 3 place settings: simple but neatly arranged plates, paper napkins folded with care, glass cups, cutlery sparkling clean. In the center, serving dishes with food, roasted chicken with homemade seasoning, white rice, beans, salad, and boiled potatoes. It wasn't sophisticated. Say it wasn't from an expensive restaurant, but it was made with care, with attention, with love. Dawson sat down and looked at all of it, feeling a tightness in his throat. "It looks incredible," he said, and it was true. "It's simple," Hannah said, serving Millie first, "but it's made with love. That's the best kind of food then." They started eating. At first, there was a shy silence, but soon Millie started talking, telling stories about the school she would start soon, about the new drawings she had planned, about Bella and the imaginary adventures they had together. Dawson listened to everything, smiling, asking questions, genuinely interested. Hannah watched the interaction, her heart filled with gratitude. "Is it tasty?" she asked after a while. "It's delicious," Dawson replied, and he wasn't just being polite. "It's been a long time since I ate something made like this, with attention." Hannah smiled, looking down. "Good." When they finished eating, Millie got up from her chair and went to the living room. She returned minutes later holding a folded piece of paper. "So I made this for you," she said, handing the drawing to Dawson. He took the paper and opened it carefully. It was a different drawing from the others, more detailed. There was a table with 3 people sitting, Hannah, Millie, and him. Above the table, a dialogue bubble coming from Millie's mouth said, in shaky, childish letters, "Since Mummy started working, we never ran out of food." Dawson stared at the drawing for a long moment. The words, the meaning, the weight of it all. He felt his throat tighten. He felt his eyes sting. He blinked quickly, trying to hold it back. Hannah saw it. She placed her hand over his on top of the table, a brief but comforting touch. "Millie, why don't you go play in the living room for a bit while I clean up here?" she said softly. "Okay." The girl ran out with Bella in her arms. Dawson carefully folded the paper, as if it were the most fragile thing in the world, and put it in his shirt pocket. "Thank you," was all he could manage to say, his voice husky. "She loves you, you know," Hannah said softly. "And I don't know how to thank you enough for everything you did." Dawson shook his head, still unable to speak. Hannah stood up and began clearing the dishes. Dawson offered to help, but she refused. "You are a guest. Sit outside on the porch." "I'll be done here in a minute." The porch was small, with just 2 wooden steps and space for 2 old plastic chairs, but from there you could see the whole street, the lights of the neighboring houses turning on, the sky darkening. Dawson sat in one of the chairs and took a deep breath. The night air was cool. The sound of children playing in the distance mixed with the clatter of dishes being washed inside. It was peace, real peace. Hannah appeared a few minutes later, holding 2 cups of hot tea. She handed one to him and sat in the other chair. "Sorry, I don't have anything more sophisticated to offer," she said, blowing on the tea. "This is perfect." They were silent for a while, just drinking the tea, listening to the sounds of the night. Then Hannah spoke. "Dawson, there's something I never properly told you." He looked at her, waiting. Hannah took a deep breath, looking at the dark sky. Millie's father left me when he found out about the pregnancy. Dawson was silent, just listening. So we had been together for 2 years. I thought it was real, that it would work out. She laughed without humor. But when I told him I was pregnant, he disappeared, literally, changed cities, blocked my number, never came back. She took a sip of the tea, her hand trembling slightly. I was alone, completely alone. No family, no real friends. Just me and a baby on the way. Dawson felt anger towards someone he had never seen, but he didn't interrupt. I did everything, Hannah continued, her voice firmer now. Cleaning houses, odd jobs. I sold things I owned. I worked pregnant until the last day I could stand on my feet. After Millie was born, I went back to work 2 weeks later. Because I had no choice. She looked at Dawson, her eyes shining even in the low light of the porch. There were days I didn't eat to make sure she did. There were days I cried hidden in the bathroom because I didn't know how I would pay the rent. There were days I thought about giving up. But you didn't give up, Dawson said softly. No. Hannah shook her head, determined, because she needed me, and because I promised myself I would give her everything I never had. Love, security, dignity. Dawson stared at her, not with pity, not with judgment, but with something much greater. Admiration, pure, deep, genuine admiration. You are the strongest person I have ever met, he said, and every word was true. Hannah let out a moist laugh, wiping her eyes. I don't feel strong. But you are. They were silent again, but this time it was a shared silence, comfortable, safe. Dawson looked at his own empty cup, thinking, for the first time in his life, he was admiring someone without needing that person to prove anything, without needing certificates, without needing visible achievements, without needing external validation. He admired Hannah simply for who she was, for what she had done, for the silent strength she carried, for the way she had transformed pain into determination, abandonment into love. Thank you for telling me that, he said finally. Thank you for listening. Hannah stood up and extended her hand to him. Want to come inside? I'm going to make popcorn, and Millie will insist that you watch a movie with us. Dawson took her hand and stood up, smiling. That sounds perfect. And it was. Later, the three of them were sitting on the small sofa, cramped but happy. Millie between them, holding Bella and eating popcorn. A children's movie was playing on the television, but no one was paying much attention, because the movie didn't matter. What mattered was that moment, that feeling of belonging, and for the first time in years, Dawson felt at home. Not in a house, but at home, with people who cared, with people who were real. And when Millie dozed off on his lap, still holding Bella, and Hannah adjusted a blanket over her daughter with such tenderness, Dawson knew. He knew this was more than he had come looking for. It was more than he thought he deserved, but it was exactly what he needed. And he wasn't going to let it slip away. Sunday dawned with a rare blue sky, the kind that looked hand-painted. The sun was shining, but the air was cool, perfect for going out. Dawson woke up early, as always, but this time it wasn't because of insomnia or anxiety. It was because of excitement. He had plans. Plans that involved two people who had become the most important part of his days. He picked up his phone and sent a text to Hannah. Good morning. How about an outing today? Park, ice cream, whatever you two want, my treat. The reply came quickly. Good morning, Millie will love it. What time? I'll stop by at 10. Perfect. We'll be ready. Dawson smiled to himself in the empty room. He got up, showered, put on comfortable clothes, and left the house with a heart lighter than he remembered feeling in years. When he arrived at Hannah's house at exactly 10 o'clock, the two of them were already waiting on the porch. Millie was wearing a little yellow dress with printed flowers and a ribbon in her blonde hair. Hannah wore light jeans and a simple white shirt, her loose hair shining in the sun. You came! Millie shouted, running down the steps and jumping into his arms. Dawson caught her in the air and spun her around, drawing laughter from her. Of course I came. I promised, didn't I? You promised. Millie held Bella tightly, the doll now inseparable from her. Hannah came down the steps with a small shoulder bag, smiling. "Good morning." "Good morning." Dawson put Millie down. "You both look lovely." Hannah blushed slightly. "Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. We needed a day like this." "Me too." The park was about 20 minutes away by car. It was large and full of trees, green lawns, and a lake in the center where ducks swam peacefully. There were playgrounds, walking trails, and kiosks selling popcorn and cotton candy. As soon as they arrived, Millie ran toward the playground, holding Bella in one hand and waving at them with the other. "Come on, Mummy! Come on, Dawson!" Hannah laughed and ran after her daughter. Dawson followed, feeling something strange and good at the same time. Lightness, joy, freedom. He pushed Millie on the swing while Hannah took photos with her old phone. The girl laughed loudly, asking to go higher, higher and higher. Dawson obeyed, laughing along, feeling the wind on his face and the sun on his back. "Higher! Higher!" Millie screamed, her voice full of pure happiness. "Careful, Dawson," Hannah warned, but she was laughing too. "I am being careful," he replied, but pushed one more time, just a little bit harder, just to hear her laugh again. After the swings, they went to the slide. Millie insisted that Dawson go down with her. He hesitated, looking at the small slide, clearly made for children. "Come on, Dawson, come on!" Millie pulled his hand. Hannah was laughing, recording everything. "Go on, Dawson, show some courage." He rolled his eyes, but couldn't hide his smile. He climbed the narrow steps, sat at the top of the slide with Millie on his lap, and went down. His feet almost dragged on the ground on the way down, and when they reached the bottom, they both tumbled onto the grass, laughing. Millie quickly got up and jumped on top of him. "Again!" "Say again." "Millie, give Dawson a break." Hannah came over to them, still laughing, extending her hand to help him up. Dawson took her hand and stood up, brushing the grass off his clothes. "I'm fine. I can go again." And he did. 3 times, because Millie's laughter was worth any discomfort. After the playground, they walked around the lake. Millie ran ahead, showing Bella to the ducks, explaining to the doll that they didn't bite. Hannah and Dawson walked side by side, slowly, enjoying the sun and the moment. "Thank you for today," Hannah said, looking straight ahead. "She's so happy." "I'm happy too," Dawson replied. And it was true. "It's been a long time since I felt this good." Hannah looked at him, surprised. "Seriously?" "Seriously." He put his hands in his pockets. "I forgot what this was like. Going out without a commitment, without thinking about work, without carrying weight." Hannah nodded slowly. "I understand I forget sometimes too, but Millie reminds me. She has this gift of making everything seem simple. She is special. She is..." They walked a little longer in comfortable silence. Then Millie came running back, taking Dawson's hand with one hand and Hannah's with the other. "Let's hold hands," she announced, swinging their arms. Hannah looked at Dawson, who shrugged, smiling. So the 3 of them continued like that, holding hands, walking around the lake. They looked like a family, and perhaps, in a way, they were becoming one. In the middle of the afternoon, they stopped at an ice cream kiosk. Millie chose chocolate with colored sprinkles. Hannah ordered strawberry. Dawson got vanilla. They sat on a wooden bench under the shade of a large tree. Millie ate her ice cream quickly, smearing her whole face. "Slow down, sweetie. You'll freeze your brain," Hannah warned, wiping the girl's face with a napkin. "It's so yummy, Mommy," Millie replied with a mouthful. Dawson watched the scene, his heart clenching in a good way. He had enough money to buy anything. He could travel to the other side of the world if he wanted to. He could eat in expensive restaurants every day. But nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to that. That moment, that bench, those 2 people next to him. "Are you okay?" Hannah asked, noticing he was too quiet. Dawson blinked, returning to the moment. "I am. I'm happy." "It's strange to say it, but it's true," Hannah smiled. "It's not strange. It's good." Millie finished her ice cream and stood up, holding Bella. "Can I go see the little birds?" She pointed a few yards ahead, where there were some trees with birds singing. "You can, but don't go out of my sight," Hannah said. "Okay." Millie skipped away, happy. Hannah and Dawson were left alone on the bench. The silence was comfortable, but Dawson felt there was something he needed to say, something that had been trapped inside him for a long time. He took a deep breath. "Hannah, can I tell you something?" She turned her body toward him, attentive. "Of course." Always, Dawson looked straight ahead, toward the lake, trying to find the right words. "I had a best friend, Lucas. We knew each other since college. We started the company together. He was my partner, my right-hand man, the only person I truly trusted." Hannah remained silent, just listening. "About 2 years ago, I found out he was stealing." Dawson's voice came out harsher. "Embezzling money from the company, creating fake accounts, all behind my back, for months." Hannah's eyes widened, shocked. "My God!" When I confronted him, he didn't even try to deny it. He just took what he had stolen and disappeared, moved countries, never came back. Never apologized, never tried to explain, he just left. Dawson ran a hand over his face, the emotional exhaustion returning just from the memory. And I was left there, alone, with the company to fix, with my reputation tarnished, with a wound that wouldn't close. Because it wasn't just about the money, it was about trust. It was about friendship. It was about everything I thought was real and found out wasn't. Hannah placed her hand over his, a gentle but firm touch. "I'm so sorry, Dawson." After that, I closed myself off. He looked at her. I worked to keep from thinking. I built walls around myself. I stopped trusting anyone. I stopped getting close to anyone. Because I was certain everyone would disappoint me in the end. He paused. "Until I met you two." Hannah felt her eyes sting, but held back the tears. Dawson continued. "You two. You reminded me that not everyone is like that there are still good people. People who stay, people who don't disappear when things get hard." Hannah squeezed his hand. "Some people leave, Dawson." Her voice was soft but firm. "That's true, and it hurts, but some people stay, and those people, the ones who stay, are the ones who truly matter." Dawson looked into her eyes, blue, clear, honest. "And you stayed." Hannah nodded slowly. "I stayed, and I'm going to keep staying." The words fell like a balm on the old wound. Dawson felt something release inside him, something that had been trapped, tight, painful for so long. He didn't need empty promises. He didn't need impossible guarantees. He just needed this, someone who stayed, someone who chose to be there, day after day, without ulterior motives. "Thank you," he said, his voice husky. "You're welcome." They stayed like that for a moment, holding hands, just existing in that space. They didn't need more words. They didn't need explanations. They just needed to be there. Millie came running back, interrupting the moment, but not destroying it. "There's a blue bird. Come see, come see." Hannah and Dawson stood up, still holding hands without realizing it. They followed Millie to the trees, where there was indeed a small blue bird hopping from branch to branch. "Look, Bella, look." Millie showed the doll, enchanted. Dawson looked at Hannah. She looked back, and they both smiled. In the late afternoon, as the sun began to set, painting the sky orange and pink, they returned to the car. Millie was tired, dozing in the back seat, clutching Bella. Hannah looked out the window, a small smile on her lips. "Today was perfect," she said softly. "It really was," Dawson agreed, driving slowly. He drove them both back home. He helped carry Millie, who was sleeping soundly, to the sofa. Hannah covered her daughter with a blanket and kissed her forehead. At the door before Dawson left, Hannah hugged him. A long, tight hug full of meaning. "Thank you for everything, for today, for being here, for caring." Dawson returned the hug, feeling her warmth, the gentle scent of her hair, the feeling of belonging. "Thank you for letting me be a part of this." When they separated, there was something different in the air. A new intimacy, a deeper trust. "Will I see you tomorrow?" Hannah asked. "Always." Dawson walked down the steps and got into the car. He waved before leaving. Hannah waved back, staying at the door until he disappeared around the corner. When he arrived home, the customary loneliness didn't come, because now he had something, he had someone, he had a bond. He was no longer just Dawson Blake, the successful and solitary businessman. He was Dawson, the guy who pushed swings, went down slides, ate ice cream on a park bench, and held hands. He was Dawson, who had found something he didn't know he was looking for, a family, not by blood but by choice. And that, he discovered, was the best kind of all. Dawson took Millie's drawing from his pocket, the one that said they never ran out of food, and put it on the refrigerator, held by a magnet. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he smiled. For the first time in years, he was okay, truly, and he wasn't alone anymore. The following weeks brought a routine that none of the three knew they needed, but now couldn't imagine living without. Dawson became part of their lives, not invasively, not forcibly, but naturally, organically, as if he had always belonged in that space, as if their lives had been incomplete before and now finally made sense. When school vacation ended and Millie needed to return to classes, it was Dawson who offered to take her. "You start work early," he said to Hannah on a Sunday night while they were having tea on the porch. "Let me take her. It's not far, and I'll adjust my schedule. It's no trouble at all." Hannah hesitated, not because she didn't trust him. By this point, she trusted Dawson more than anyone else, but accepting help was still difficult for her. She had spent so long doing everything alone, carrying all the weight on her shoulders, that depending on someone felt risky. It felt vulnerable. "You don't have to do that," she said, stirring her cup. "You already do so much for us." "I know I don't have to." Dawson looked at her with that firm but gentle way she had learned to recognize. "But I want to. Does that make a difference?" Hannah looked into his eyes and saw sincerity, not obligation, not pity, just a genuine desire to help, to be present, to be a part of it. "It does," she admitted, smiling. "Yeah, but only if Millie agrees." When they asked the girl, she jumped for joy, almost knocking over her glass of juice. "Seriously, Dawson is going to take me, every day." "Every day," Dawson confirmed, kneeling down to her height. "But you have to promise that you will behave at school. No messing around." I promise." Millie held out her little pinky with seriousness. "Do a real promise?" Dawson interlaced his pinky with hers, smiling. "Then it's a deal." On the first Monday of school, Dawson arrived at their house at 7:30 sharp. Hannah had already left for work, but she had left Millie ready, impeccable uniform, pink backpack on her back, unicorn-patterned lunchbox in her hand. "Hi, good morning." Millie opened the door before he could even ring the doorbell, excited, with Bella under her arm. "Good morning, little one. Ready for school?" "Absolutely ready." They got into the car. Millie sat in the back seat, buckled herself in carefully, and started chatting the whole way. She talked about the new teacher she was going to meet, the classmates she was going to see again, the drawings she was going to make in art class. Dawson listened to everything with genuine attention, asking questions, laughing at her stories, sharing her enthusiasm. When they arrived at the school, he parked in front of the gate and walked her to the entrance. "Do you want me to go inside with you?" he asked, kneeling down to adjust her backpack. Millie shook her head confidently. "No need, I'm a big girl now." Dawson smiled, proud. "You are. But if anything, any problem, you tell the teacher to call me, okay?" "Okay." She hugged him quickly, tightly, and ran off to the playground where other children were already playing. She turned back and waved energetically before disappearing through the door. Dawson stood there for a moment, watching her disappear among the other children, feeling something warm and strange expanding in his chest, pride and perhaps, or something very close to paternal love, something he hadn't known he could feel. In the following weeks, that became an established routine. Dawson took Millie to school every morning. Sometimes he stopped by their house first to have quick coffee with Hannah. Sometimes he picked up the girl in the late afternoon when Hannah was still at work, took her for ice cream, or to the park before going home. And little by little, he began to notice things in the house that needed fixing. Small things that Hannah probably didn't have the time, money, or know how to solve. The kitchen faucet that dripped all night. The bedroom door hinge that squeaked loudly. The living room outlet that was loose and dangerous. the backyard clothesline that was crooked and threatened to fall, the kitchen window that wouldn't close properly, letting the cold air in. He didn't ask if he could fix them. He didn't ask for permission. He just brought tools one Saturday morning and started working. "Dawson, you don't have to do this," Hannah would say every time, but already half laughing because she knew he would do it anyway. "I know, but it's done now," he would reply, putting away the tools. She would roll her eyes, but the smile on her face was impossible to hide, and deep down she was profoundly grateful. Not just for the repairs themselves, but for what they represented: care, attention, permanence. Someone who saw what needed to be done and simply did it. Meals also became naturally shared. Sometimes, 2 or 3 times a week, Dawson would have dinner at their house. Simple, homemade food, but made with care and effort. Other times he would take them out to eat. Nothing sophisticated or expensive, just welcoming places where Millie could be a child, laugh loudly, make a mess without judgment, and Hannah could relax without worry. There was no pressure between them. There were no heavy romantic expectations hanging in the air. There were no silent demands. There was just companionship, constant presence, affection growing slowly, at its own pace. A conscious daily choice to be present in each other's lives. Dawson never tried to force anything beyond that. He didn't try to kiss Hannah. He didn't make grand and dramatic declarations. He didn't push for definitions or labels. Because he understood, perhaps instinctively, that what they were building was more important than any rush. It was a solid foundation. It was an unshakable base. It was trust being rebuilt, brick by brick, day after day, with patience and care. And Hannah realized it. She clearly realized that he wasn't there out of passing interest. He wasn't there because he wanted something specific in return. He wasn't there out of social obligation or disguised charity. He was there because he chose to be, because he wanted to be, day after day, without demands, without conditions. On a quiet Saturday afternoon, almost 2 months after that first Christmas that had changed everything, Dawson was at their house fixing a shelf that had come loose from the kitchen wall. Hannah was baking homemade cookies while Millie drew intently at the table, her tongue sticking out in concentration. "Done," Dawson finally said, testing the shelf with weight. "Now it's really firm. It won't fall anymore." "Thank you," Hannah replied, bringing him hot coffee. "Seriously, Dawson, you should send me a bill for all this volunteer work. You've fixed half the house." "No way. Dawson!" "Hannah." He looked at her, serious but gentle. "Let me do this. Please. It makes me feel good to help." "It makes me feel useful," she sighed, but agreed with a nod, knowing that arguing was useless. Millie got up from her chair at that moment, holding a piece of paper with both hands. "Finished," she announced, proudly. "Can I see?" Dawson asked, wiping his grease-stained hands on an old rag. Millie handed over the drawing with solemnity, as if she were delivering something very important. Dawson took it carefully and looked. It was the 3 of them, holding hands. But this time the drawing had more details than the previous ones. There was a house in the background with illuminated windows and smoke coming out of the chimney, a bright yellow sun in the blue sky, colorful flowers on the ground, growing at their feet, and he, Dawson, was drawn with a huge smile on his face, the biggest smile in the drawing. Below, in neat and colorful letters, was written, "Now you smile." Dawson stared at the drawing without blinking. The words, the message, the absolute truth stamped there in crayon and marker. He felt his throat painfully tighten. He felt his eyes sting and fill with tears that he tried to hold back but couldn't, because it was true. It was absolutely true. He smiled now, truly, not polite, empty smiles, not perfunctory smiles from business meetings, genuine, true smiles that came from within, from that place he thought had died along with his capacity to trust. Dawson slowly knelt down beside Millie, descending until he was exactly at her height. He held the drawing with extreme care, as if it were the most precious and fragile thing in the world. "You are right," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Now I smile, and it's because of you two." Because of you and your mother. Millie smiled back, that innocent and pure child smile, and threw her little arms around his neck in a tight hug. I really like it when you smile. You look handsomer and happier. Dawson let out a wet, emotional laugh, squeezing her in a strong hug. Thank you, little one. Thank you for teaching me to smile again. Hannah watched the scene from the kitchen, still, her hand over her mouth, her eyes overflowing with tears. There was something so pure, so true, so deeply beautiful in that moment that it hurt her chest with its intensity. When Dawson finally let go of Millie, he remained kneeling there for another moment, composing himself. Then he slowly stood up, discreetly wiped his eyes, and looked at Hannah. She was standing still, waiting, her eyes shining with contained tears. Dawson took a deep breath. There was something he needed to say, something that had been growing inside him for weeks, maybe months, something that shouldn't remain silent any longer. He took a determined step toward her. Hannah, there's something I need to tell you right now. She placed the trembling coffee cup on the counter, her accelerating heart pounding hard. What? Dawson quickly looked at Millie, who had returned to drawing, distracted in her own world. Then he looked back at Hannah, directly in the eyes. So I want to guarantee Millie's education. Hannah blinked several times, surprised, confused. What, Dawson? What are you saying? Her education? Schooling. Dawson continued, firm and decisive. Good private school, school supplies, courses, college when the time comes, everything she needs. I want to guarantee all of that. I want to take care of her future. Financially, structurally. Hannah shook her head, stunned, emotional, unable to process it properly. Dawson, you can't. That's too much. It's too big. I can't accept something like that. Yes, you can, and you will accept it. He took another step, now very close to her. Because I'm not doing this as a favor. I'm not doing it out of pity or moral obligation. I'm doing it because I want to, because she matters deeply to me, because you matter deeply to me. Hannah felt the tears start to stream freely down her cheeks. She tried to wipe them away with the back of her hand, but they kept coming relentlessly. And I want you both in my life. His voice came out softer now, more intense, more loaded with emotion. Always. Every day. Not out of obligation, not out of convenience, not because I feel guilty or because you need me, but because you two saved me. You reminded me what it is to truly live, to truly feel. You showed me that I can still trust, that I can still love without fear. Hannah covered her face with both hands, sobbing softly, her shoulders trembling. Dawson placed his hands on her shoulders with extreme gentleness. I know it's a lot. I know you spent too much time alone, carrying everything, and that trusting someone again is scary. But I'm asking for a chance, not to be perfect, because I'm not, but to be here every single day, to be a part of this, to be family. Hannah slowly lowered her hands and looked at him through her tears. Her blue eyes were red, swollen, wet, but there was something else there, something greater than fear, hope, deep acceptance, love being born. She didn't say anything. She couldn't form words, but she didn't need to. Her gaze said everything. It said yes with absolute clarity. It said stay, please. It said I trust you completely. It said you are already a part of this. It said I love you too. Dawson pulled her into a tight, encompassing, secure hug. Hannah clung to him tightly, letting her tears completely soak his shirt, letting years of accumulated fear, loneliness, and pain finally dissolve in that embrace. Thank you, she whispered hoarsely against his chest. Thank you for staying, for choosing to stay. Thank you for letting me stay, he replied, his voice also choked. For giving me a chance, for letting me be a part of your family. They stayed like that for a long moment, just holding each other, just breathing together. Just existing in that safe space they had built brick by brick, day by day with patience and love. When they finally separated, Millie was standing right next to them, holding Bella, looking up with worry. Are you crying? She asked, her voice small. Is everything okay? Hannah quickly knelt down, wiping her eyes and flashing a huge smile despite the tears. Tears we are, my love, but it's tears of happiness. They are good tears. Millie tilted her head, thinking seriously. Then is everything really okay? Everything is okay, Dawson confirmed, kneeling down too and opening his arms. It's more than okay. It's perfect. Millie smiled with relief and hugged them both at the same time, her small arms trying to reach both of them, squeezing with all the strength she had. I love you both, she declared simply, honestly. Hannah kissed the top of her daughter's blonde head, emotional. We love you infinitely too, my love. Dawson squeezed the two of them in the hug, feeling something inside him finally becoming complete. Something that was broken being fixed. Something that was empty being filled. Something that was frozen completely melting. And there, in that small kitchen with the smell of homemade cookies in the air, embracing two people who had come into his life by chance but were now everything, Dawson Blake finally understood what home was. It wasn't a place. It wasn't walls or expensive furniture. It was that, it was them, it was chosen love. It was a built family. It was presence that heals. And he was never going to let it slip away again. 1 year later, Christmas Eve again. But this time, everything was different. Hannah's small house had been transformed. Colorful lights flashed in the windows, hung carefully by Dawson and Millie on a Sunday afternoon. A simple wreath adorned the front door. Inside, a small but heavily decorated tree dominated the corner of the living room. Ornaments they had chosen together, the three of them, laughing and arguing over each one. The smell of food filled every room. Turkey in the oven, potatoes roasting, stuffing being prepared, dessert cooling in the refrigerator. And there was something else. Something that couldn't be seen but could be felt in every inch of that space. Life, joy, belonging. In the kitchen, the three of them worked side by side preparing the holiday dinner. There was no rigid division of tasks, just natural movement, like a dance rehearsed without realizing it. Dawson peeled potatoes at the sink, his shirt sleeves rolled up. Hannah seasoned the turkey with attention, running her fingers over the meat, ensuring every part was covered. Millie, now 6 years old and visibly bigger than the year before, stirred the stuffing in a large pot, standing on a stool, her tongue sticking out in maximum concentration. Is it good? She asked, showing the spoon to her mother. Hannah tasted it and smiled. It's perfect, my love. You are turning into a chef. Millie smiled proudly and returned to stirring. Dawson looked at the two of them and felt that good clenching in his chest, the one that had become familiar, the one that meant home. What are you smiling about? Hannah asked, noticing. Nothing, just happy. She walked over and quickly kissed his cheek, a natural, automatic gesture. They didn't need grand gestures. Small moments said everything. A few hours later, the table was set. Colorful plates that Dawson had bought on an impulse because Millie had liked them. Cloth napkins that Hannah had embroidered. Glasses sparkling under the soft light. And the food. So much food, but this time made by 6 hands, made with laughter. Small arguments about seasoning, flour flying, burnt fingers, and quick stolen kisses when Millie wasn't looking. They sat down, the three of them, in the same seats that had become theirs without planning. Millie clasped her hands. Can I say grace? Hannah and Dawson exchanged an emotional look. Of course, sweetie. Millie closed her eyes. Thank you for the food. Thank you for our house. Thank you for Mommy. And thank you for Dawson, who came back and stayed. Dawson felt his throat tighten. Hannah took his hand under the table. Amen, Millie finished, opening her eyes and smiling. Amen, the two repeated, their voices choked. They began to eat. The conversation flowed easily. Millie talked about school, about her new friends, about the Christmas play she had been in. Hannah talked about work, about the promotion she had received. Dawson shared funny stories from the company. There were no strange silences. There was no discomfort, just presence, just family. After dinner, while Hannah put away the leftovers and Dawson washed the dishes, Millie disappeared into her room. She returned minutes later, holding a carefully folded piece of paper. I made this for you both, she said, seriously. Hannah dried her hands and knelt down. Dawson dropped the sponge and approached. Millie slowly unfolded the paper, revealing the drawing. It was the three of them, but it wasn't like the others. This time they were inside a house, their house. There were details, the Christmas tree in the corner, the ornaments in the windows, even Bella sitting on the sofa. They were holding hands, smiling. And above, written in large, colorful letters, "Our family." And below, carefully, "This is our happy Christmas." Hannah covered her mouth, her eyes instantly filling with tears. Dawson had to take a deep breath not to cry right there. "Is it pretty?" Millie asked anxiously. "It's perfect," Dawson said, pulling her into a hug. "It's the most beautiful drawing you've ever made." Hannah hugged the two of them, squeezing tightly, trying to save that moment forever. "Thank you, my love. We will keep this forever." Later, when Millie finally went to sleep, after much negotiation and promises that Santa wouldn't come if she didn't sleep, Hannah and Dawson went out to the porch. The night was cold but clear. The lights they had hung twinkled gently, creating a cozy glow. Hannah brought out 2 steaming mugs of hot chocolate. They sat in the old plastic chairs that now felt like thrones. They were silent for a moment, just watching the quiet street. The neighboring houses also lit up, the starry sky. "1 year," Hannah finally said, her voice low. "It's been 1 year." "It has," Dawson agreed, taking a sip of the chocolate. "It feels longer, and at the same time, it feels like yesterday. I remember you sitting on that bench, alone, looking so lost." "I was lost." He looked at her. "Completely." Hannah held the mug with both hands, warming her fingers. "Yes, and now?" "Now I'm home." She smiled, her eyes shining even in the low light. "You saved us, me and Millie. Not just financially, but you gave us hope. You gave us a family." Dawson shook his head. "You're wrong. You two saved me. I was a ghost before I met you. I just worked, breathed, existed, but I didn't live. And now I live. Truly." He put his mug aside and took her hand. "Because of you, because of this." Hannah intertwined her fingers with his, squeezing. "Thank you for staying," she said, her voice trembling. "Thank you for not giving up, for choosing us every day." Dawson pulled her closer, wrapping her in a sideways hug. "Thank you for letting me stay, for giving me a chance, for teaching me that I can still trust, that I can still love without fear." They stayed like that, embracing under the twinkling lights, listening to the distant sounds of Christmas night, low music coming from a house, muffled laughter, church bells in the distance. "Merry Christmas," Hannah whispered. "Merry Christmas," Dawson replied, kissing the top of her head. And there, on that simple porch, in that small house full of love, with cooling hot chocolate and twinkling colored lights, they celebrated. Not the expensive dinner, not the pricey gifts, not the appearances, but what truly mattered. A new life, built brick by brick, chosen day after day. A family, not of blood, but of true bonds, of conscious choice, of real love. And that, Dawson finally understood, was the greatest gift of all. It couldn't be bought, it couldn't be forced, it couldn't be rushed. It could only be built, with patience, with presence, with truth. And they had built it, together, and it was perfect. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like, because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.